Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 5000-350-633. This is a plain bearing, 5-knuckle, full mortise, standard weight, steel base, 3.5 by 3.5 inch, removable pin, satin brass hinge. Very nice looking hinge, as you can see there. Okay, let's dissect the part number and talk about what this hinge is. 5,000 means a number of things. First of all, it means it's a full mortise style hinge. You can see the swag on the hinge leaf here, where that's meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when the leaves are brought parallel, so you have that common margin, or that typical margin between the doors. It means it's a 5-knuckle hinge. It means that it is plain bearing. There are no bearing packets, and a plain bearing hinge would be typical and common for residential applications where you're going to have a moderate amount of use. You would not use a plain bearing hinge on a door with a high amount of use, or a fire rated door, which wouldn't apply to a 3.5 inch size really anyway. If you wanted ball bearing, you would just add BB to the beginning of the part number and it'd give you ball bearing, which is always a good idea, but for common installations, you know, in residential low volume applications, this would be perfect. It's also going to mean that it is a standard weight hinge. On a 3.5 inch hinge, that leaf thickness is 123 thousandths of an inch thick. A template pattern on the screw holes. There'll be 3 holes here. That is a standard size for 3.5 inch, or what's called the template pattern. It also means that it is a steel based hinge. Okay. Moving on, well, it also means that it will give you a square corner hinge with a button tip. Removable pin. You can pop that tip out if you want and reverse the entire tip assembly should you want to. I don't see a reason why you would, but you certainly could if you wanted to. Bommer logo, that's there. Now the 350, that means that this hinge is 3.5 inch tall and 3.5 inch wide, and the height on the hinge is the first dimension, and that's important to know. Maybe not so important when you have a square hinge like this, but if you had a rectangular hinge like a 3.5 by 5 or a 5 by 4.5, it's important to know that the first dimension in the set of 2 is always the height. The 633, that means 2 things. It means, again, it's made of solid steel. It's made of steel, but it also has a satin brass finish on it. And of course, being Bommer, you can have this hinge in any finish that you want. Your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, your satin polished. They, of course, can do oil rubbed as well. Very common to have an oil rubbed bronze hinge on this. Now, there is also a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull not only all of the Bommer items, but before we get to that in the full line catalog, there's a link below this video to the cut sheet. And that's important because it will give you the location of the holes. If you're replacing existing hinges and you're not sure if these hole locations will line up, refer to that document. Eliminate any possibility for error, and you'll know exactly where these holes for the screws, and speaking of the screws, they're included in a complementary finish. That cut sheet also is applicable for other series of hinges, not only different base materials from steel to brass to stainless, and you can see how the part number changes, but different bearing configurations, plain bearing, ball bearing, and then lube bearing, but also the quantity of knuckles as well. Anything that starts with that 8 versus the 5 is a 3-knuckle hinge, and then the different sizes: 3.5 by 3, 3.5, 3.5. Then there are 2 wide throws that are available in a 3.5 inch height. And that covers everything regarding this hinge. Now, options that you can get, probably wouldn't do a lot of different options in terms of security, even though you can do non-removable pin. You might be interested in a decorative tip, like a ball tip, urn tip, steeple tip, ball, urn, steeple. Something's telling me I'm missing one. Or a button tip like this. Button tip would be typical. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. And if you know the name Bommer, you probably know their name as a manufacturer of spring hinges, especially double-acting hinges like their 3029 series. So if you know their name, you probably know them for that, or Postal Specialties. They're a manufacturer of mailboxes, so you might know them for that. And the link to the manufacturer's page will allow you to review the catalog as it pertains to builders' hardware, hinges and whatnot, spring-loaded, single or double-acting, and then commercial, residential, industrial-type hinges. But also their Postal Specialties catalog is there as well. The last thing I'd like to point out to you is the Bommer logo, and right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer's quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer 5000-350-633 hinge or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.